I genuinely and Maddie genuinely believes we were put on earth to do exactly what we're doing now. We love doing this. We love meeting new people, and it just gets us so freaking excited. We think you as family, and we love you all. So, at the base and the heart of midlife crisis, not gonna lie, it's Mikey G and Maddie Mintz. And why it is because over 30 years ago, I met this crazy SOB at the 4th grade bus stop. I swear to you, when I first laid eyes on this dude, he was perpendicular to the ground, or not perpendicular, like horizontal to the ground, hanging at a 90-degree off a stop sign. And I was like, what the hell did I just get myself into? And since that, we had a budding, flourishing relationship, been best friends our whole lives. Obviously, life got in the way. You go to college, you get married, you start businesses, things happen. Fittingly enough, our midlife crisis brought us back together, hence the name. We're older than most people in this space, but we found NFTs about a year ago, and then we said, you know what, we're really gonna create a company. As we get more connected, as we go into the metaverse, what we're about to do is meeting new people, having real raw conversations. We think it's going to become a lost art. So we're here to make that happen, to bring it all to you, and to help you expand, learn, and grow. And we came up with a very simple mission statement. That mission statement is to bring back the lost art of genuine human connection. And I got one last thing to say, and I'm dead serious when I say this. I genuinely, and Maddie genuinely believes we were put on earth to do exactly what we're doing now. We love doing this. We love meeting new people, and it just gets us so freaking excited. We think you as family, and we love you all. So, at the base and the heart of midlife crisis, not gonna lie, it's Mikey G and Maddie Mintz. And why it is because over 30 years ago, I met this crazy SOB at the 4th grade bus stop. I swear to you, when I first laid eyes on this dude, he was perpendicular to the ground, or not perpendicular, like horizontal to the ground, hanging at a 90-degree off a stop sign. And I was like, what the hell did I just get myself into? And since that, we had a budding, flourishing relationship, been best friends our whole lives. Obviously, life got in the way. You go to college, you get married, you start businesses, things happen. Fittingly enough, our midlife crisis brought us back together, hence the name. We're older than most people in this space, but we found NFTs about a year ago, and then we said, you know what, we're really gonna create a company. As we get more connected, as we go into the metaverse, what we're about to do is meeting new people, having real raw conversations. We think it's going to become a lost art. So we're here to make that happen, to bring it all to you, and to help you expand, learn, and grow. And we came up with a very simple mission statement. That mission statement is to bring back the lost art of genuine human connection. And I got one last thing to say, and I'm dead serious when I say this. I genuinely, and Maddie genuinely believes we were put on earth to do exactly what we're doing now. We love doing this. We love meeting new people, and it just gets us so freaking excited. We think you as family, and we love you all. So, at the base and the heart of midlife crisis, not gonna lie, it's Mikey G and Maddie Mintz. And why it is because over 30 years ago, I met this crazy SOB at the 4th grade bus stop. I swear to you, when I first laid eyes on this dude, he was perpendicular to the ground, or not perpendicular, like horizontal to the ground, hanging at a 90-degree off a stop sign. And I was like, what the hell did I just get myself into? And since that, we had a budding, flourishing relationship, been best friends our whole lives. Obviously, life got in the way. You go to college, you get married, you start businesses, things happen. Fittingly enough, our midlife crisis brought us back together, hence the name. We're older than most people in this space, but we found NFTs about a year ago, and then we said, you know what, we're really gonna create a company. As we get more connected, as we go into the metaverse, what we're about to do is meeting new people, having real raw conversations. We think it's gonna become a lost art. So we're here to make that happen, to bring it all to you, and to help you expand, learn, and grow. And we came up with a very simple mission statement. That mission statement is to bring back the lost art of genuine human connection. And I got one last thing to say, and I'm dead serious when I say this. I genuinely, and Maddie genuinely believes we were put on earth to do exactly what we're doing now. We love doing this. We love meeting new people, and it just gets us so freaking excited. We think you as family, and we love you all. So, at the base and the heart of midlife crisis, not gonna lie, it's Mikey G and Maddie Mintz. And why it is because over 30 years ago, I met this crazy SOB at the 4th grade bus stop. I swear to you, when I first laid eyes on this dude, he was perpendicular to the ground, or not perpendicular, like horizontal to the ground, hanging at a 90-degree off a stop sign. And I was like, what the hell did I just get myself into? And since that, we had a budding, flourishing relationship, been best friends our whole lives. Obviously, life got in the way. You go to college, you get married, you start businesses, things happen. Fittingly enough, our midlife crisis brought us back together, hence the name. We're older than most people in this space, but we found NFTs about a year ago, and then we said, you know what, we're really gonna create a company. As we get more connected, as we go into the metaverse, what we're about to do is meeting new people, having real raw conversations. We think it's gonna become a lost art. So we're here to make that happen, to bring it all to you, and to help you expand, learn, and grow. And we came up with a very simple mission statement. That mission statement is to bring back the lost art of genuine human connection. And I got one last thing to say, and I'm dead serious when I say this. I genuinely, and Maddie genuinely believes we were put on earth to do exactly what we're doing now. We love doing this. We love meeting new people, and it just gets us so freaking excited. We think you as family, and we love you all. So, at the base and the heart of midlife crisis, not gonna lie, it's Mikey G and Maddie Mintz. And why it is because over 30 years ago, I met this crazy SOB at the 4th grade bus stop. I swear to you. Whoa. What up, folks? I actually remembered to unmute myself this time. How about that, Maddie?
Look at you. I'm impressed, man. I am impressed.
I'm super impressed with myself as well. How's everybody doing today? Damn, man. It's been a while. I had a big ass weekend. I'll start with you though, Maddie. How you been, man? It's been a little. I haven't even talked to you in like 3 days, which is
Dude,
unheard of.
It's unheard of. Yeah, I knew that's when I know you're busy. And so I had a good weekend, man. You know the weekends where you think you're gonna have a lot of free time,
Yeah.
and then each day goes by and you're like, what happened? How I thought it was supposed to be kind of a chill day. So kind of turned out like that, but I got to do some things I wanted to do, and I mean, just it's fall, man. I was outside hanging out with the dogs. I don't know if you saw my YouTube short, but it was
Oh my
real
gosh,
nice,
dude.
man.
I said
It
that's
was
the
real
one
nice.
thing I don't get on the West Coast is that, dude, there's that like 2 to 3 week period up in the mountains of Penn State. It's just so freaking gorgeous.
But I've been in your shoes when it comes to weddings, and I'm really excited to hear how your weekend went, because this is a first for you, right?
Yeah, man.
Tell us
Universal
about it.
Life Church, $25 online. You can become an
Boom.
ordained minister. Not a big deal. First wedding ever. I was in, I laid down. I laid down the wedding vows. Everybody loved it. Threw a little Mikey G humor in there. Had people laughing. Had people crying. I did the whole thing in an 8-minute situation. So they loved it. Everyone complimented me. We had a blast. It was cool too. They got my little sister-in-law got married at our same venue, which was in La Jolla, California. Like couldn't be more picturesque. uh, Weather was beautiful, right on the beach, little bluff, open air forum, just freaking awesome. So, yeah, had a great time. You know me, family and stuff like that recharges me. So, I think at one point I looked around, we had 15 people in the house and 8 dogs. Most people would say that's a nightmare. I was in my glory making pizza, baby.
That's awesome, man. I'm so happy. I knew it was going to go well because I mean, it was just meant for you to be in that position. But I just wanted to hear it from you, man. And I mean, like you said, everything seemed perfect. And ultimately, at the end of the day, two people are together, and it's a beautiful thing. So that's awesome, man. Congrats.
Yeah,
Good
cool.
for
And it
you.
was kind of a cool little mini vacation too, because we just rented a little Airbnb right on the water in La Jolla. So like, even though I was 15 miles from my house, I felt like I was on vacation. So it was kind of cool. Um, all right. Well, with that being said, we have an amazing show tonight. Two amazing people with one of the bigger franchises that have hit the Web3 space. But before we get into the world famous midlife crisis question, I'm going to kick it to you again, Maddie. Let's introduce these people and then we'll get going.
All right. So, we love to give some interesting background facts, just something a little juicy, maybe you haven't heard of when it comes to the people that we're about to speak with. So, we got Raj, we got Yogi. I'm going to do Raj first. This one got my attention because I'm a movie buff, right? I love movies. Now here's the thing. I say I'm a movie buff, but anybody that actually knows or has studied anything about film, I really just enjoy movies. That's probably a better way to say it. I am by no means critical in any means,
Interesting
but I love good
background
movies.
facts.
And here's what's cool. He's sitting there, senior year of college, hanging out with his roommate, goes to see Batman Begins. Now, for those of you who aren't movie people, if you haven't experienced Christopher Nolan, you need to. Okay? Because here's what he does. He takes what you think it's going to be, flips it upside down, and says, "You're welcome. I just gave you a little gem for the rest of your life." And so he did that with Batman Begins, and it affected Raj to the point where he was like, "I think I need to actually think about what I'm doing with the rest of my life. I think I want to do stuff with film." That should tell you how powerful that movie is. Excellent movie, but I love that he was able to see that and be moved by that. That's actually something that I can relate to a lot. And so, welcome to the show, Raj. How you doing?
Hey guys, doing well? How are you? Thank you for having me.
Sure, sure.
Absolutely. We're going to have a great conversation, man.
It's gonna be good, man. And we're gonna get your story here in a second, but I gotta let everybody know who Yogi is. So Yogi, interesting fact about Yogi. Here's what we got here. I said, "What's a little fun fact? Maybe something that people don't know." And he immediately responded with, "Let me tell you something that basically nobody knows." And that's always juicy when you get that, right? Because most of the time, Mike will attest, when we ask that question, people will say things like, "Man, I don't know. There's nothing really interesting about me," or, "There's nothing that, people already know about me. I'm an open book." Nope. Yogi was like, "Nobody knows this." Ready for this? Yogi is a writer. On the side, he likes to write. Got into it for all, well, we'll let him tell that story as to what got him into writing. But it started with short stories, evolved into poetry. Now, how many people do you know write poetry these days? Mike, can you even name one poet?
Robert Emerson is that one.
You know what? My level of poetry knowledge is I don't even know if that is a person that
I
writes
don't even know
poetry.
if his first
Wait,
name
isn't
is
there a Frost?
Emerson
There's a
something.
Frost or something.
Frost.
Frost, I think.
Frost.
Okay, boom,
Emerson.
nailed it. I got one. That's more than I can. That's more I can attest to. So Yogi, you're gonna have to fill us in on it, man. But I think that is really cool because I feel like that is one of those things that a lot of people don't study, and there's probably going to be a little bit of a demand for that. So how you doing?
Good, man. Good. Thanks for having us. Yeah, excited to share.
Heck yeah.
Outstanding.
All right. Well, I will take it away from here. Thanks for the introductions, Maddie. Raj, we're going to go with you. first, just in case you might have to leave a little early, first, also, you'll tell it through your story, but just kind of your role as getting into National Lampoons and you being the owner. I can't wait to hear this story, and we're gonna have a good time with it. So, world famous question coming straight to you: how did you get to the seat that you're sitting in today? Please give us Star Wars Episode 1, 2, and 3. You said you like to ramble on, and we're ready to listen.
I love it. I love it. We were always taught when we were in college and coming out, you keep your answers concise for the interviews, but it's you guys are here facilitating or hopefully what is an interesting conversation. So I guess it's therapeutic to share more than less. Uh, well, Yogi and I actually, I'll speak for him for a little bit for a second. We're first cousins, and we both grew
That's
up.
right. I remember you saying
Yeah,
that.
That's cool.
yeah, we grew up across the street from each other. We're 6 years apart, and his mother and my father are brother sister, and all of their siblings moved over time from India to that street, basically. So we were two of, I think, 14 or 15 cousins that all grew up together.
Yep.
That's cool.
And yeah, so I was born in Minneapolis, suburb of it, and grew up there and went to, basically K through 12 at Edina, in the Edina school system.
Hmm.
And growing up, and you guys probably know that Bollywood is a huge
Mm-hmm.
sort of, it has more influence than even Hollywood does here
Hmm.
in the States.
Yep.
Uh, we grew up seeing virtually everything because our parents would go and rent the video cassettes from the local Indian store. And so that was kind of,
Nice.
when I think back, yeah, that was like my first exposure to just cinema and storytelling. And at the same time, we're watching cartoons and all the stuff that was on TV, TGIF, all that stuff that was on back then.
TGIF, man. I haven't heard that in ages. I love that you brought
Right?
that up, man.
Yeah, the downfall of broadcast means we don't get to watch that anymore.
I
I don't know when they
know.
did away with it, but that was a thing. So yeah, grew up in Edina, Minnesota. We actually, Yogi still has long hair, but I don't. We were raised Sikh, and that's interesting because we're the only brown kids in this mostly white school system, which was all good, but we just stood
Right.
out like sore thumbs.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of was formative because you're trying to assimilate, but at the same time try to preserve your identity and culture.
Hmm.
And when I look back, I think humor was a big part of that because it's so universal. And I would chalk up being well liked to having a pretty good sense of humor, and it was a nice icebreaker anywhere I went or anybody I met. So
Hmm.
um, making friends and all of that was actually, it came kind of natural to me. Then I went to the University of Minnesota, so I stayed local, as I mentioned, Big Ten, and our family is a family of entrepreneurs. They all studied some domain or expertise, but ended up going into various businesses. And I think when I originally set out to go to school, I thought I'd be maybe a part of one of them coming out. Uh, but this was in the early 2000s, and the economy was firing, and tech and Wall Street and consulting. There were like a handful of areas, marketing and PR, where the jobs out of college were highly coveted. And I just took a real interest in finance in college, and so I ended up majoring in that. And the place to go was Wall Street. They didn't recruit at the University of Minnesota, so then it turned into a thing of how do I kind of finagle my way in where we're not a core school that they come to. And so I interned at this private equity fund one
Hmm.
summer between my second and third years of school. I graduated in 3 years. I had a bunch of AP credits, and I think that
Oh,
helped sell my
nice.
story. Yeah. Um, and the guy I worked for basically said, "Look, I can't pay you, but I'll help you get a job out there." And he made good on that. So he introduced me to all his pals from business school,
Yeah.
and I just did that whole thing where I kind of back channeled into some banks to get interviews, and ended up starting out at Merrill Lynch when
Nice.
it was still around. And actually, Maddie, there were quite a few. I think Penn State either happened to be a target school for them, or they just had a big alumni presence, because I know several people that had gone to
Mm,
Penn State and were at Merrill. So there's some kind of, they had a good tie to Wall Street,
got
which
it.
is nice.
Yeah.
Um, After Merrill, I left, and remember, this is after Batman Begins. So I'm in Merrill Lynch. I'm doing industrials investment banking, which is companies in like old economy sectors like manufacturing,
Uh-huh.
auto, construction, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, After that, I went to this private equity fund called Greenbrier Equity Group, which
Okay.
they do buyouts of companies in the transportation sector. So, again, not media, not entertainment, but uh, another area or industries I felt would be interesting to learn about. Uh, After that, I came to this crossroads where I wasn't. It didn't the sort of like the fulfillment wasn't there, and I felt like I had a good handle on how that world works. So I thought I would give it one more shot and try to go to an investment company that had the broadest mandate possible. Because if I could invest in anything, so long as it made sense, and I still didn't like it, then I should just leave and try to get a job in LA working at a studio or something.
Hmm.
And in the first 3 months of that job, I took it. So I ended up going back to Minneapolis, joined this credit hedge fund, and they invested everywhere as long as it was like the risk reward profile was attractive.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't matter what industry, what geography, uh, nothing like that. They did everything from they bought hard assets um, like wind turbines, to bought companies, to bought stock, to it just ran the gamut. So 3 months into that, I was in LA visiting some friends socially, and I met who's now been my partner for 11 years, a guy named Kevin Frakes.
Okay.
And yeah, Kevin was running a film production and finance company called Palm Star. It's still there, and we built it up from where it was. And we came up with a plan, just kind of like over beers, on how my fund could team up with him to actually go and produce and finance independent films. And the rest is sort of history. So we ended up, it took 6 months to get that platform up and running. And then we made around 15 movies together uh, in the time that I was still at the investment fund. And then I left and joined him. And at this point, IP was becoming a thing. It was becoming like a phrase in the vernacular. It was thrown around loosely, and it still is today, even more so. But the idea of
Hmm.
finding something that is real intellectual property, that has awareness, there's value to what it is. That's kind of um, uh, uh, like fundamental, and
Yeah.
then trying to find things that are off market or have some hair or dirt or complexity around them.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the same year, we had two opportunities that came up. One we just aggressively pursued. Kevin's favorite book is The Alchemist. You guys read that?
I
Do you
have
know it?
heard of it, but I have
Yeah.
not
Okay.
read it.
Okay, so it is it's a global bestseller. Like, we're
Right.
talking over 100 million copies sold, and it, I think at this point, is the best-selling unproduced book of all time. Everything else that sold more copies than it has been made into a movie.
Wow.
And
Mm,
yeah, it's a really great story. It's a metaphor for life, essentially, but it's told through the lens of this shepherd in Spain who goes to Egypt to find a treasure. And essentially, there are many gists of it, but the gist of the story is basically, what you learn along the journey is more valuable than the outcome, even if you
Right.
get the outcome, right? And there are
mm,
many other teachings in it, but um, that was one. And it was so meaningful to so many people around the world, and it hadn't been made, and there was a lot of complexity around it. But over time, we've kind of cleaned it up and figured it out, and we took over that. And then the other was National Lampoon.
Right.
We had produced 3 or 4 comedy films by that point, really loved it, and wanted to find a more systematic, uh, or institutionalized way to do it instead of doing it in one-offs. And we looked around the entertainment business and didn't really see anything where we could say, hey, what, that's a good example of how this should be, but in comedy. But then we saw it, for example, in horror. Blumhouse had become a thing by then. And if you guys know that brand, they make several horror films a year, right? And they're relatively low budget. And
Are they the ones that made Donkey Punch?
No.
You know which that one is? You know what I'm talking about. Blumhouse is the legit one, but there's another one that intentionally makes just over the top shitty horror films.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who I think does like Sharknado. Maybe it's a different company.
They made another horror film called Rubber, and it's about a tire killing people. I mean, it's craziest shit out.
Oh my gosh.
To your point though, there are a lot of comparisons to be drawn between horror and comedy,
right?
In terms of budget, audience wanting to be together to experience it, the beats and the way they play out, where you build up expectation and then you either get the laugh or the scare. And so that was part of it. We're like, why isn't there a Blumhouse for comedy? I mean, SNL is the only institution we could think of that had been around for a long time and was just cranking out. It was talent, but not necessarily other IP. And then someone called us and said, you guys want to take a look? And that's where, everything changed. We spent a year taking over it, just diligence and all that. And now, we've been in the driver's seat for a few years now. And Web3, I'm going to just jump to Web3. Web3, once I learned about it, and I was late to the game relative to you guys, and Yogi really brought my attention to it. We had some inbound phone calls on it, and then it just started. There was this, like, a switch flipped in my mind of, this solves every problem or perceived problem we've had about how do you pair audience with and fans with content, with creators, be able to play with format and story type, and do it all in one place, as opposed to this on YouTube, that on Quibi, rest in peace, that on, you know what I mean, like Hulu, Netflix, broadcast, like, so
right.
So yeah, that's how we got to know each other, Mikey, right? Just through Mike Amoya and the Web3 aspect. But here we are, and now we're spending a bunch of time and resources trying to have this be the locomotive for the brand going forward.
I love it. And that was, I'd give that like Star Wars episode 1.5, maybe. What do you feel, Maddie?
I feel like I watched the end of episode 1 and just skipped the Clone Wars, and then he rushed to Web3 a little bit. So maybe we got a Rogue One in there, but I'll take it because there's some stuff to unpack there. Mike, did you have any questions that you wanted to ask?
I'll let you go, and I'm sure you're going to ask similar questions, and I'll add on to anything.
So one of the questions I have is, so first of all, I'm fascinated because you had this interesting family atmosphere growing up, right? You had a lot of family very close to you, and I don't want to assume, but are you guys very close knit?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and sometimes too close knit,
right?
As can happen when everyone's together.
Sure. So the reason I say that is because you said you had a lot of entrepreneurs in the family, so there's clearly an influence there. I mean, you even thought that might be kind of the path you took. But you said a lot of professional backgrounds. What do you think, because of that, having that background, how much of that do you think played into your, let me phrase this a different way. A lot of people, if they had studied finance or anything like that, something that, on a professional type field, and then all of a sudden watched a movie by Christopher Nolan and were like, man, I kind of want to do this the rest of my life. Most people would not be able to deviate or even be willing to even imagine deviating, because it's like, I've just invested, because you know how it is. When you're in college, it's your whole life, right? And you think it's really everything, but then 20 years later you realize it's really just a speck. But Do you think that your background and maybe like the family upbringing and support and you've seen people have to work hard and go through with entrepreneurship, was that why you were able to kind of make a pivot and say this is something I want to do and kind of chase a passion, so to speak? How much of that would you say influenced you?
It's such a great kind of holistic question about what makes people tick and
Yeah.
where they start and where they end up.
That's
I
why we're
think,
here, baby.
yeah, I think, I mean, I'll try to answer that, maybe not in that order, but how just thoughts are coming to my
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah,
However it happens.
absolutely.
When someone has kind of technical background or they've pursued, college or higher studies and then deviate or kind of just get off the beaten path and go down the entrepreneurial road,
Hmm.
it's almost like you just ultimately it's a sense of confidence, right? And the
Yeah.
ability
Mm,
to re- assess what risk might stand in front of you and determine that you have the skill set, the experience, and the confidence in yourself to be able to overcome those obstacles. Otherwise, why would you even pursue it?
Yeah.
And I think beyond that, you look at the world around you, and if you're in an ordinary job, which is totally fine, but you want more, and it's not want more money, you want more challenge, you want more exposure, you want to build something where you have some more influence and control over what it could become. Uh, being kind of a cog in a system doesn't allow for that. So then you have to kind of take the plunge. It's the only way, where you're like, okay, look, it's a blank canvas, but I have to bring the like the easel and the paint brushes and the paint
Hmm.
and draw the picture, right? And that's not
Hmm.
easy. So yeah, it probably just comes down to character traits, but having confidence. If you've gotten a degree in something, then you're at least confident you know how to do that. Then you get
Hmm.
some experience in finance. The beauty of banking and private equity is you get exposure to so much there. I mean, I was
Yeah.
21 and sitting in
Yeah.
meetings with CEOs of billion-dollar companies. I wasn't
Yep.
running them. I was barely talking, if at all. And it was like, don't say anything because we don't want to lose this deal,
right.
right?
Yeah.
But to bear witness to that, you start to get a sense of how business works, and and
Yep.
and ultimately, I mean, you guys know this. It still just comes down to how you interact with people, how you can look at a situation, communication, right? There's kind of, if we were to make a checklist, it's probably common across
Yeah.
Yeah.
every industry.
Yep.
Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely, the childhood aspect of seeing the grown-ups around me do it on their own, definitely, and and bringing financing to Hollywood also is a way to kind of just start at a higher level.
Sure.
And that was a decision I went through where I was like,
Yeah.
if I'm going to quit and go into a job at a studio or an agency, I don't want to go to the mailroom after all this great experience. And if I go to a studio, I don't want to get just cornered into the CFO's office working for
Yeah.
him or her. What's another way to go about it? And I think if you're creative enough and patient enough, you can just spend time thinking about, well, how do I connect the dots from A to Z? For me, it took 6 years. I wasn't even consciously thinking of it all the time. And then one day it just kind of culminated in
Yeah.
this beers in Sherman Oaks in October of
Right.
2011. So
Well, and that kind of goes back to your journey as an alchemist, right? I mean, it kind of, or like the alchemist, right? The journey took you there, and you find it along the way. But it's interesting because you say you were sitting in rooms with CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, but the thing is as a child you were sitting in rooms with entrepreneurs and you were learning, you were hearing how they thought, and it Mike and I always say it kind of demystifies. A lot of people have, there's a massive barrier to entry to business ownership because people are just terrified of the idea that they have to be perfect, and what if it doesn't work, and it's once you get around entrepreneurs you're like, good grief, they have no idea what they're doing either half the time, you know what I mean? They're
yeah,
just figuring it out and willing to take the risk, and they're willing to put 90, 100 hours, whatever it might take to correct those mistakes and keep going.
Right.
But then once you see that, you're like, oh wait, like that's a massive mental hurdle,
Yep.
and you got that twice because you had that with your family, and then by going into finance and seeing how money works, I think that's a massive step that a lot of people miss. I think if I could go back and do it again, I mean, as an engineer, my brain still thinks like an engineer. I don't know how to turn that off. I see the world very analytically and methodically that way. But being able to understand how money really works, and more importantly, how money is used as a tool to finance projects and how those conversations go, because that to me is that's just wizardry, right? I don't understand that well, and I'm starting to learn it now, and it would be really nice to have that. Do you think that that's been a big benefit, having that kind of 1-2 stepping stone into where you guys are at now?
Yeah, I think so. And at the time, I remember sitting at the fund that did transportation, and I was like, I don't know how any of this experience is ever going to lend itself to, um, future passions or desires. But then, even then, there is when I was there, one of the deals I spent the most time on that never consummated was we were trying to buy AIG's aircraft portfolio. They were, you guys know, I mean, that was like in the cover of the news every day for tanking the financial sector with
Right.
all the risk
Yeah.
AIG took. And they happened to own, besides GE, the largest fleet of commercial aircraft in the world. They owned over 1,000. They were leased, they were
Wow.
on lease to airlines all over the world.
Right.
The reason I bring that up is because that was a distressed situation. This thing's underwater. The whole company's underwater, like over
Yeah.
$100 billion. They got to shed their assets. And Tim Geithner and the U.S. Treasury Department is actually the entity that had oversight over that, the disposition of various assets. So just getting exposure to like how DC was looking at, what they do with this portfolio of things and how they'd sell them off or revive life into them to make sure the economy stays stable and they get, their money's worth when they wind the thing down. And yet, you're still looking at the aircraft themselves, and the economy is globally crushed, and you're wondering how airlines in Asian countries that have been hit even worse than the U.S. or, you know what I mean? Like, it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
just so complicated but so interesting. And I was like 25, right? It just,
Right.
Yeah.
and of course I was working for the guys that were really running it, but I'm still listening to it all, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, that becomes relevant then, because The Alchemist and National Lampoon weren't nearly as, on such a global scale or anything, but they had complexity. So it's like, okay, I've seen this before in a different way, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
No.
was starting. I was able to then start making connections like that.
Right. And that's such a good
Cool.
story. Maddie and I talk about this a lot, right? And we say, we streamed for 2 years video games to a lot of bots and empty chats. And you look back and at that moment you're like, man, this sucks. Like, what are we even doing? But what we were doing is what you were doing, right? You're sharpening the sword in a different aspect. And,
Yes.
that time got us used to being in front of camera, having to fill empty space with random thoughts between Maddie and I, right? And that has enabled us to create what I think is one of the more unique shows where we ask one question and then we just roll with it. That wouldn't have been possible without 2 years of getting hit up by different porn bots and God knows what else is out there.
I can say with confidence that the way you guys facilitate this is compared to general spaces I've listened to and Discord we've participated in, it's already best in class for sure. So it
Thanks.
shows.
I
Definitely.
appreciate it. Well, I don't want to leave Yogi out. You've done an awesome job. I do have one question, and we'll probably dive, unless you have one more, Maddie, before I go.
You're good to go. Good to go.
Fantastic questions. Of course, my dogs decided that they're just gonna lose their shit now. Hopefully, I can. Can you guys hear that?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Just
Great.
a tiny bit. It's
Okay.
not loud, Mike. You're
I
good.
can't. No.
All right. So I loved Matt's question. One of the things that I love to ask is, like, well, literally, you're on a Twitter space with family, right? You seem like you're very close to your family. They're a big influence in your life. And it doesn't have to be the one, but like any couple, like just real impactful things that you learned as a young boy, whether it be the importance of family, kind of what Maddie was alluding to, but we talked more about the power of having parents that were entrepreneurs. More like, is there a moment or an experience that stuck out in your mind as a young person? Because that's when your mind's getting melded a lot, right? That you'd like to share with us and the community as something that helped you out.
It's actually I'm really now drawing on my what fuzzy memories I have of youth. I feel like my memory wanes day by day, but
I feel that.
give me just a beat to think on it. I mean, some of what stands out is my mother was a scientist. She retired last year, and uh, uh, so she just practiced in the field that she studied, but she really, in an indirect and direct way, made sure we grew up with good character, because our dad was always he was the entrepreneur, so he was always working. He worked in a corporate job as an engineer. Like you, Maddie, he didn't study. I think you said you studied aerospace. Is that
Yep.
what you said? Yeah.
Yep.
So he had done mechanical engineering and then industrial engineering for grad
nice.
school, and he worked at a defense contractor into the mid 90s, and then he left. And so actually a comparable field, but he was always he was getting home right at dinner time. And so where I was going to go with this is, when I look back, I think about how had she not kind of her father was a judge, and so he like raised them in a very disciplined manner, best manners, work ethic, being polite and courteous, being firm when you have to, all those aspects that you think about when you think of a judge. And so I know she in her own way kind of she wanted to imprint that on my brother and I. And so I think that was important, because you still have to have good character, even if you're successful or you're not, right? Your ethics, integrity, communication, not being an angry jerk or a sad jerk, right? Like, you have to be able to manage all that. And that's half of the battle, is your internal battle in your mind. And so I think that was important. It was really important. And then it was this constant sense of between her and my father, and my dad more so, this constant sense of optimism, and kind of raising you in your failures to be like, yeah, but you're smarter than this. You're better than this. Not in a put you down way, in a lift you up way. Like, forget it. Just move forward. And it was almost borderline irrational sometimes. But I guess, in retrospect, even working on this Web3 venture or anything I have in the past, you guys know this, you hit pivot points where you're like, or roadblocks where you're like, I don't see the clear path around or over this, right? And you have to have a sense of enough optimism to keep spending time on it. Otherwise, why would you? Right?
Absolutely. And then the self-doubt that even us or you as building anyone's been successful. How many times do you wake up and one morning you're just like, what the hell am I even doing?
Yes.
Like, why am I doing this? What am I doing? And you gotta move through that, right?
It would be great if there was a show, or it became more of a thing where, instead of interviewing the famous or the successful person to just talk about X, Y, or Z, tell us about 10 failures in your life that were really interesting. I would listen to that, right? Because you never hear about those. And
I love that, man. Maybe we'll start that series for you.
Right, there you go. But that's where you come out stronger, but also you're forced to kind of you're forced to analyze yourself and think, like, what am I missing, or what's the wrong assumption here, or is this a bad idea altogether? You know what I mean? There's a series of questions you have to really confront, and I think that's healthy. It's the only way forward.
Yeah, and I think the thing that people need to hear more is, I feel like, and even me, right? Like when Maddie and I found this, and it was for the first time in my life, I was like, this is something I think I'm good at, and this is something I want to do, right? 100%. For the first time in my life, I found something I'd rather do than play video games, and that's a big deal. I still play video games. But what I'm getting at is even when you're being successful, you still have those conversations, you know? And I don't think enough people say that like even during good times and quote unquote, what people see as success, that's not even easy. And there's a constant struggle.
Yeah.
The only constant that existed is that there is no constant in life.
Yes.
Right.
Change. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And you know, it's interesting going back to what you were talking about, because I agree with you, Mike, and but also what you were saying about failure. I mean, I think there's like this cognitive dissonance that occurs coming out of college that we're so wired in our academic system, and that's a whole different conversation. And I'm not, you know, can it be better? I think we all agree it can. How do we do that? I think we can have a conversation, but the concept of the way we're tested as students growing up, right? And it's like, oh, did you get an A on that? Ooh, you got an 85. You missed some. You know, it's like almost like we scale it down, like making a mistake is frowned upon, right? You're punished. It's punitive to make mistakes. But then all of a sudden you get out into life, and the reason it would be so nice to have a podcast of just famous people talking about their mistakes, you know, it'd be great is like how many roles Denzel Washington didn't get. You know what I mean? How many
Yes.
roles that, you know, these superstars, these people. It's like I love the story when Michael Jordan talks about how he got cut from the high school basketball team, and you know what that did, and how he just sat there and like worked and worked and worked and practiced and practiced and practiced, but then he made it the next year. And it's when you hear that, all of a sudden, as a student, you're thinking, you know, I've been trained this whole time to not fail, but yet all of these people who are just giants in their fields, they failed all the time. I think hearing that would be really important for people to make that connection, because it's truly part of the growth process. It's part of every growth process, quite frankly. So I think that's really, really good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's
love
a
it.
way to expand I mean, the expectations, mental health, all these. It
Yeah.
just it really. What was Tesla like in the early years? Elon, how many
Ugh.
days out of the first
Oh,
10 years did you think it was going to die that day? Right? No one's
yeah.
asking him that. They're just right.
Right.
Yeah.
I
Right.
bet it was every other day. It's like we can't make payroll. Nobody's gonna, the battery doesn't work. Whatever. Nope.
Yeah.
That's like from the early 2000s, but it's like that never existed, and then all of a sudden Tesla's on the map. No, there's a
Yep.
decade of it struggling, I'm sure.
Right.
Had to be.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about, the
Oh,
crazy
yeah.
thing is today, there's still people that are like, Tesla's nothing. It's a failed company. It will fail. It's going to blow up. And it's like, guys, you know, like
Yeah.
it never ends is what we're saying, you know?
Yep.
I love it.
Awesome. Well, great conversation. Thank you for that very thoughtful answer. I think it's very interesting to hear people. One of the things I love about the show is, like you alluded to earlier, you know, a lot of these same principles, you know, perseverance, doing things consistently, failing often, not being afraid to change. You know, these are universal principles that Maddie and I use this analogy all the time too. There's no secret to losing weight. You cut your calorie deficit, work out, watch what you eat, and you're going to lose weight. But yet billions of dollars are spent on trying to figure out how to lose weight quick, right? And it's the same thing about business is we talk to so many people from so different walks of life, and we end up talking about the same thing. But what's cool is your story might resonate with someone in our community or someone that watches this video completely different than if Maddie or I were to say the same exact thing. So that's what
Exactly.
I love doing this. That's one of the main things I love doing. So thank you for that heartfelt insight. And now to you, Yogi. You've been listening to this fascinating conversation, and now you've got a ton to say too. So, same question to you. How did you get to the seat you're sitting in today? Star Wars episode 1, 2, and 3. And then after this, we'll get into the Web3 and the project stuff. He's on mute because we've just been talking for so long.
He's off mute. He's coming.
He's coming.
Yogi, you there? There you go.
Did we lose him?
No.
I
just
see
saw him
his.
go off mute and on mute. Push to talk? Uh-oh. I don't know.
Oh, crap. He's on push to talk.
I don't know. I just see it flipping on and off. See, what did we tell you guys? We told you we're going to have a little microphone bloopity bloop.
Maybe we can get him. Maybe drag him out of the chat, Maddie, and then drag him back in. See if that fixes
That's
it.
going to mess up your windows, but I'll do it real quick. Sure.
Yeah, I don't care about that.
Mine was still set on push to talk, so maybe.
There you go. Yogi, you there?
Can you hear me?
Yep, we got you now.
There we go. Yeah, it was lighting up, and I'm like, they can't hear me because they.
Weird.
We got you.
All right.
No worries.
Well, yeah, you heard me ask you the question, right?
No, yeah, I did. I
Okay.
made a few jokes until I realized no one could hear me.
Well, what were the jokes?
They were the
Well,
funniest jokes we've never heard.
Yeah, exactly. We'll just keep it to that.
All right, I like it.
A lot of the story, at least in the beginning, I won't like duplicate too much of it because me and Raj did grow up on the same street, 6 years younger, and for me and my household, I guess, kind of where my inspiration led. My dad's an engineer, and when he was in India, he studied mechanical engineering. Then he ended up getting his MBA, and then worked in the merchant navy for a year. And he bounced around a lot. And when he came to the U.S., he got his master's in computer science. So the guy's got 2 masters and a mechanical background, and was doing something completely different when I at least was growing up.
Right.
And so for me, a lot of my life has been surrounded around education and academics. I think just being an Indian family, being an immigrant, I was very focused on just performing when it comes to test exams, and math was always a strong suit. And writing in English was a weakness. So that's where I spent a lot of time trying to make sure that my writing, grammar, and all that was good. And I looked across the street. Raj is 6 years older. It was a wide variety of ages. Raj is the oldest of the cousins that grew up on our street, and our youngest is actually 10 years younger than me. And so if you think about that, there are 12 of us first cousins with a 16-year age gap, growing 4 houses on one block and another house on a second block. And so for me, a lot of that was being surrounded by family culture was a big influence on my life. Growing up Sikh, I still have my hair. I wear a turban. I have a beard. So very spiritual from that perspective. And so those were some of the guiding principles for me. And even as a kid, I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur and do something I really care about. And a lot of that was kind of driven by, when my sister was 2 years old, she's 3 years younger. She had very severe pneumonia where she was in the ICU for 4 months. And so my dad quit his job and, spent a lot of time with her, and just seeing those interactions were like, there's more to life than working.
Yes.
To do what you really care about. And having
It's
seen
powerful.
what they went through, even though I was 4 or 5, you still have like this imprint on your mind about like being together, family and some of that. I was always focused on, all right, like life's really short. I want to make sure that I do stuff that I really enjoy and love, and never live life where, hey, I'm going to be 65 and I'll go travel. So I was always with the mindset of what is everything that I can do today, and live in that, particular way.
Yeah.
And so as I, grew up and being in this, kind of bubble, I would say, the bubble of my household, the bubble of my family, I would, get lost in my imagination. And some of that was also due to the fact that when my sister did get sick, my parents didn't want me going out as much. Or like, we grew up in Minnesota, winter, like they were very afraid of like, don't play in the snow too long. Because, when you go through that kind of trauma, it's kind of
Yep.
like, all right, how do we make sure this kid doesn't get sick?
Right.
Yep.
And so, outside of my cousins, I stuck to, video games. I had an N64, and movies, and Star Wars Episode 4. I still remember, the 27-inch TV. It was on like Channel 5. Saw it for the first time and I fell in love. And that's where
Yeah.
my imagination took off. And then I remember I was in 6th grade. Halo came out. That was so that's one of the first time. So I was at Raj's house. Raj's younger
Man.
brother Peter had gotten the game, and it was rated M, and I didn't have an Xbox yet, and I went over and they had gotten this 1080p TV, and I'm like, this is amazing.
Dude.
Xbox 1080p 2001, and that got me into this creative side of things, where like I really like sci-fi, I like tech, I want to know, I love these futuristic settings. And one thing I kind of skipped, and I'll jump back to it. So I told you guys my dad's an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
He built a desktop in 1995, and I still remember it. I was 4 years old,
Wow.
just watching him play with this machine. And as I grew older, I would, spend a lot of time with this computer, like learning, like, what is Windows 95? I remember getting dial-up internet, and for better or worse, if I had a screwdriver, I took it apart a few times and maybe broke a few things, but was really, fascinated by these devices. And so,
Yeah.
Star Wars, Halo really pushed that. And so, for the longest time, I was like, I want to be in the field of science.
Right.
I'm good at math, I'm good at physics. How do I become an astronaut or something in that field?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as I grew up, high school, now it's about like, let's figure this out. Raj is in finance, killing it. My other cousin Peter's in finance, killing it. And my dad, he was like, I want you to do engineering, but you need to be a business focused individual. And at the time, we had gone through 9/11, and we went through the dot-com bust. And for him, it was like, hey man, engineers aren't respected in the United States. They don't really care about you. No one's really thinking about it.
Interesting.
Which I get. There was a bias back then because salaries weren't there. And so
Yeah.
he's like,
For sure.
once the dot-com bubble burst, it was like, right, well, what's the point of technology? There was a different sentiment. And then on top of that, being a guy with a turban, even though we're Sikh, everyone assumed we were Muslim. And so, you had a lot of, that was the first time I think I ever experienced racism, was after 9/11.
Gotcha.
And so with those dynamics, that's how I started going about the college process. And so
Interesting.
I had so many AP credits where if I had gone locally to the University of Minnesota, I would have graduated in like a year and a half or 2 years. I can't remember.
Jeez.
Yeah. And so, and that's what I wanted to do. I got into 3 schools. I got into Michigan, Minnesota, and NYU.
Yeah.
And I remember, and the reason why I'm saying this is kind of like fate has a way of getting you to where you need to be.
I love it.
I wanted to go to the U just because it was home. Everyone had gone there. It's safe. I was comfortable. It was in my comfort zone.
Right.
And then we went to New York, and I was like, I don't know why anyone would live in this city. There's
Right.
no greenery. It smells like crap. And the morning of the visit, I was like, I'm not going to go to NYU. There's no way I ever go to this school. Why waste time? Let's just sleep in and like go do touristy things. So never visited campus. And it's funny. So I applied. My top choices were UPenn. They had this dual degree program between the engineering and business school.
Yeah, they're great for
And
that.
yeah, so that was my number one choice. And then Columbia was number 2. And then I realized I didn't take the right AP science exams to get into that program, which was just funny because I think I took 10 or 11 of them, and it's like, oh, you didn't take chemistry, so you can't apply to this. And
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, so
It's
we'll
entrance.
cross that off.
Yeah, that's a whole.
And yeah. And so I remember it was 6 hours. My dad's in India. And I remember this because I go to my mom. I'm like, do you really want me to apply to NYU? It's $60. Why don't you give me that money? I'll buy a video game. I already got into the U. I got into Michigan. I'm waitlisted at the UPenn dual degree program. Like, we're fine. And she's like, no, you're going to apply to this school. Lo and behold, 4 months later, I got into NYU, and my parents made a dictatorship-like decision. You're not going local. People respect NYU. That's where you're going. And my dad based that on a judgment where he talked to his friends in India. He's like, have you guys heard of NYU Stern? They're like, oh yeah, it's a great business program. And so, I came home from school one day. It was May 1st or 2nd. And you had to reply by May 1st. My mom got an extension, and they're like, yeah, so me and your mom were talking, and, frankly, you're too young to know what you want to do in your life. So you should go to NYU. And
hey, that's one way to approach it.
Yeah, it was like, you're afraid. And then at the same time, and Raj can talk about this, him and his younger brother were on the same boat. Like, hey, dude, you need to leave Minnesota. Like, you're going to see the world in a very different light. Growing up outside of our family, we were the only, call it cultural family in our school system, really.
Sure.
And
Right.
so now, in hindsight, it was the best decision that my parents ever made to force me out, because I loved going to NYU for 4 years.
Right.
And living in New York and experiencing cultures. But the downside was I didn't get to do engineering. And I always had this affinity to, technology, putting things together, coding. So I ended up doing a minor there. But what that ended up taking me to was towards the path of banking. I did my summer at Wells Fargo Industrials. And I remember, I think it was like a month and a half in, and I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, this is just not something that I enjoy at all. And a lot of it was I had this, idea of like, make a lot of money, have a lot of fun. And it didn't really equate for me. And I also had some health problems at the time. And it was just really like, is it really worth sacrificing health and time to make, call it like one of the top tiers of salary after graduation at the time.
Right.
And for me, it just wasn't worth it. I remember, buying stuff, going on trips, and I'm like, just to like, all right, how do I feel better about this? And so after my junior year, I had to take a step back and really think about, do I really want to do banking for 2 years? Just to, have a stamp on my resume and kind of fit with my colleagues, just because it's a competitive environment.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember I went to India for 3 weeks, and one of my family friends that we grew up with, died in a car accident. And, he was 2 years older, and I'm like, shit, man, this life's really, really, like, you don't know what's going to hit you, right? Like, not to,
Right.
I guess that's a pun right there, but like, it's, so as I graduated, I ended up joining a healthcare technology company, a startup, because I was like, this is a mix between finance and strategy that I've studied, but I get to wear the builder's hat and be hands-on.
Right.
And so joined this 5-person healthcare company. And then, reason why I went into healthcare was kind of, going back to my sister getting sick. At that time, healthcare really sucked. And so my dad lost his job because of her insurance bills. And so and so this guy that I worked with, he was a United Healthcare exec, and he's like, dude, insurance sucks in this country. Let's make it like something special. Like, do you want to join me on this endeavor? And I'm like, yeah, let's try this, because this is something that I personally care about.
Right.
And so, spent 3 years in the healthcare space. And it's funny, he wanted me to move out to San Francisco. At this point, I didn't want to leave New York. And again, this is where fate has a funny way of getting you to where you need to go. When Donald Trump won the election in 2016, our healthcare business really slowed down. A lot of it was tied to Medicaid, Medicare improvements, and state hospitals. And so basically we were helping low-income people get the care they needed so they would avoid the ER. And
got it.
What I also learned was that red tape really in healthcare and just government stuff is really terrible.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to move. And as soon as an administration changes, even if they're not going to do anything, they're like, we need to pause everything until we know what this new administration, this new Congress needs to do.
Right.
And at that point, I was like, this is something that I care about, but if you're never going to let me do anything, I don't want to waste my time trying to bash my head against people that are too afraid to change.
Right.
You have healthcare boards that are, we're 40s, 50s, 60s. I'm a 22-year-old sitting in a boardroom. This was a multi-billion-dollar hospital system in Texas. And, I was like, so how do we focus on patient quality? And they were like, how do we get more people in the door? And I'm like, we are on very different sides of
Yep.
this optimization debate. And,
Yeah.
you know, what it turned out to was, all right, like, where do we go next if everything's going to pause? And at that time, they were like, hey, dude, you're young. We're going to keep working at this, but you should pivot. Like, let's find something else because we don't know if this business is going to be around
Right.
in 12
Yeah.
months.
Right.
And so I left my job, moved back home, spent some time in Minnesota, and ended up getting an offer in San Francisco. So I was trying to avoid San Francisco for 3 years, and here I got an offer for a
Yeah.
pre-IPO company in San Francisco.
Uh-huh.
And so end of 2016, moved to San Francisco and, joined this ad tech firm. And I have to say that was probably my best experience to date. I
Oh,
was
really?
thinking at the time, yeah, it was, I'd done healthcare and I'm like, what did I do healthcare for? Now I'm in advertising.
Right.
And
Mhm.
the core skill that I had been doing throughout all of this was finance. All right. Either finance from fundraising or strategy. Now I'm at, from a 5-person company. Now I'm at an 800-person company that's, operates in 13 countries. So that was the one skill I had. But the best experience from this was not because of what the company did, but I joined this group of individuals that really empowered me. The CFO
That's
was
huge.
amazing. Yeah. He gave me confidence of, hey, you've worked at this startup and it didn't work out. That's fine. You're not an idiot. Like, he gave me my confidence back because I was looking at it where I spent 3 years at this, some outside force killed this basically. And, my friends are now, either associates or in private equity. And I'm, still trying to figure out what I'm going to do. Like, I'm not in a traditional career path.
Right.
And going to this company really kind of, brought it back from.
Lost Raj.
Okay.
Keep going.
Yeah, keep going. It's okay.
It gave me like the confidence that like we're going to like everyone has a different path. And as long as you enjoy and you have people around you that like tell like, they empower you to grow, that's what is going to get you to wherever you need to go next. And I didn't realize that at the time. I remember like even 2 months into that job, I didn't like it at first. I was butting heads with like certain individuals, and a lot of the work I thought didn't make sense.
Right.
And this is the first time I had dealt with corporate politics. I'd never been at a big company where there's politics between groups, individuals, even team members. And I was like, they're like, you need to be a director or whatever one day, and like you need to do X, Y, Z. And I'm like, I don't want to be a corporate climbing individual. Like I am here to like learn and grow and do something fun and exciting. I don't work towards, I want to get a promotion to manager or whatever.
Right.
Because I've had this mindset that I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to do something unique. This is why I came into the startup world, the tech world. This is where my passion is. How do I build something that positively impacts people? And
I love this.
He, the CFO was like, you need to travel, do stuff. Through this, I went to London, I went to Australia, I went to Singapore. I was traveling so much where it was like, I thought New York was a melting pot of cultures, and you leave the country, it's amazing. And not to say I hadn't traveled more, but now you're traveling for work, you stay a little longer, you do it more frequently. And it just, it was in hindsight, a very kind of, it was like the next step of my personal professional development. It kind of brought everything back. As a kid, I wanted to be in science and technology. All right, I can't code. How do I do this in a different way?
Right.
And after NYU, staying away from banking and going into the tech space, that was step one.
Right.
Going to this firm was step two. On all right, now I'm learning how a big company operates. How do you operate over different geographies? What does that mean? And 2 years into it, it was like, all right, like now what do I do? Because the company wasn't going to IPO anymore. The landscape for ad tech was not great. And my CFO was like, hey, like I'll help you to wherever you need to go next. Like you've put in your time here, you've had a good experience, but like I don't think you need to stay here anymore. Like you should, what's next?
Wow.
And
you've had some good leaders, man.
Dude,
This is cool.
Yeah, that is an amazing mentor story right there. I wrote that down to just even talk about that, man.
Yeah, and I probably didn't do it as well of a job. I've been jumping around a bit, but like I'm like now thinking how I could have said this better.
No,
But
don't worry about it, man.
these are,
Yeah, it's great.
This is a free flowing conversation. If you have
Yeah.
something to add, go for it.
well, it was this the entrepreneur side I didn't mention at the beginning that I wanted to mention when Raj was talking, and then I just forgot. I was eating a samosa. That was the joke I was making on why I took a few seconds to respond. But
Nice.
as a kid, seeing what my dad was doing and seeing what my uncles were doing, I always wanted to be a businessman. For whatever that means, like a businessman / astronaut. Like, you know, a kid doesn't really have rational thoughts.
Right,
Like,
right.
I want to be an astronaut, and I also want to do this. I had this massive magazine collection from NASA and these Orion telescope, just because I was fascinated by the stars. And at the same time, I wanted to be this business guy. And I didn't know what a Ferrari was, but I remember in 5th grade, they asked you, like, if you had $1 million, what would you buy? And I spent a lot of time figuring out how to spend $1 million. Made a spreadsheet, and I had a PowerPoint. I was like, Dad, I want to incorporate a company called Sing Incorporated. This is my business model. And I used to have Pokemon cards, and I got bored of them. So I sold my Pokemon cards to buy the next set of cards. And I started doing that with video games. So
Yeah.
I didn't have to bother my parents about money. Like, hey, can I get this new game? And so with my dad, I made an eBay account, and I set up like a small little business trading Pokemon cards, Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and like buying video games, selling them, and then using that money to buy another game, and just kind of like, you know, recycling it. I wouldn't like call it a business
Yeah.
today, but as a kid, I was like, I'm a businessman now. I'm buying and
Hey,
selling.
It's a side hustle, man. That is a business. From a kid's standpoint, I mean, you're a CEO at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember, so, you know, in Indian culture, when you visit India, you get all your relatives kind of give you money. Oh, the kids are here, give them some money. And I remember one
Gotcha.
year my mom used my money, because I would never use it, to buy clothes. And I came back and I'm like, Mom, I had like a lot of rupees, and what'd you do with them? And so then I learned what compound interest was that year, and I made a spreadsheet of like, you borrowed 5,000 rupees. If I were to charge you 1% rate, this is how much you owe me, and so thus you should buy me an Xbox.
I'm loving it.
How did that work? How did that go?
It didn't actually play out at all in that way. What she did say was, learn how to read Punjabi, and I will buy you an Xbox. Like she incentivized me to like, all right, learn our language, learn our spiritual texts. And if you can do that, like that's how I got my first. I had a Game Boy Color. Then I got this. I forget what it was called. The next version of a Game Boy, I remember that's how I got that. And then the
Advanced?
Xbox was. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Dude, I
Game
mean,
Boy
it's
Advance.
amazing when you're little, because, dude, similar story with my mom. Like, I vividly remember just wanting to play video games, and she's like, you can play for as long as you want, but you need to know your times tables, up to 12 before I let you do anything. And damn straight, guess what I spent all my time doing? Figuring out that times table.
Yeah, dude, it's like the burden of being the older child.
Yeah.
So I have one sister, and I remember during summers, we would be learning plus and minus in school, and my dad's teaching me multiplication and division at home, and I'm like, dude, none of my friends are doing this. Like, everyone's
thing.
playing outside, and it's like,
Same
no, you're
thing.
gonna learn.
Yep.
You're gonna learn this.
Yep.
And
Yep.
and then cursive wasn't a thing, and my dad's like, no, you need to know how to write properly.
Right.
Like, you are gonna learn cursive, you're gonna learn proper grammar and whatever, and the education aspect on my family side was, my grandpa had went to college, and that wasn't something that happened in India at the time.
Right.
Like, my grandpa was born in the 1920s, and he went to a British college in India. Like, I think there was they had opened up some facilities at the time, because it was all ruled under the Queen until 1948, I believe.
Right.
And so, he was very well written, spoken, educated, and I remember he would visit, and he's like, what kind of English do they teach you in America like this? And I was like, British proper English and American English are very different. Let's just start there.
Right.
And so that's where like the educational aspect came in. Anyways, going back to that entrepreneurial spirit, it was like, all right, I've worked at these companies. where do I go next? And, I thought about going on to the venture side. Like I wanted to, I get bored easily. I have a short attention span. So maybe I can, be an investor. Like that would be something I would enjoy. Or what are ideas that I really liked? And this is kind of when crypto came into play. When I was living in San Francisco, that's when I first got into, Ethereum and Bitcoin.
Mhm.
Like I looked at Bitcoin, from a research perspective back in I think it was 2013 for healthcare, because blockchain technology and medical claims processing is like fascinating, but
Right.
very difficult to do. The technology wasn't there.
Yeah.
One of my biggest regrets is not buying Bitcoin at that time, because I remember Googling what Bitcoin was. I think it was like 300 or $600, and I'm like, why would someone spend 300, $600 on this? Technology, great.
Yeah.
Why would I buy this token? Like I want to use all the tech. I don't care about the token.
You're about 80% of our previous guests that have said that, and we've had people that have gone as low as like 20 or $30.
Yeah, it was. And my dad's earlier, because he was like, dude, I don't think about stuff as an engineer. He read the paper. He was like digging into like, oh, what could we do with this? And I'm like, dude, you read the paper. How did you not like think about buying it? He's like, dude, I just thought it was like the engineering was fascinating. No one had done this before. So, but I wrote up a few business ideas during my time at this company, but crypto just wasn't there. Like I couldn't quit my job rationally and be like, I'm gonna go do this, because everyone I talked to, it was like, hey, you're gonna get sued by the SEC. Like regulatory is not gonna let you do this, because one of the biggest ideas I wanted to do was real estate, and how do we tokenize real estate assets? That was what was most exciting to me.
Yeah.
Because on the side, my family has a real estate business, and I'm like, well, the average American doesn't have 3 houses or 4. Like, you can't really, like, how do we make it where everyone can have rental income, even if it's like a part of it, right? Like, say I want to throw $1,000 into something and generate dividends. And then I, design this like basic concept out, talk to a few people, and I was like, dude, there's no legal way for you to ever do this. If you did, you need like $3 million and like someone that's really good on the legal side. I'm like, I don't know how to raise that money.
Right.
And during that time, my dad was like, dude, you should get an MBA. And so I applied thinking that, hey, I'm not going to like really go. What's the point of an MBA? I'm a finance undergrad. And I remember applying. I applied to Stanford early because that was my top choice. And then I applied to Harvard and Wharton. And I remember writing those essays really quickly because I was like, I don't really want to go to B school.
Right.
So I went to Portugal for the week. And then, when the application deadline was coming up, I rehashed some of my essays and sent it to Harvard and Wharton, hoping like, all right, like maybe one of these will click. Otherwise, I already have like a few prospects, and I'd rather just work, thinking, putting my finance hat on. Do I want to spend another $200K on education, or do I want to, keep making money?
Yeah, make 200K.
Yeah. And then I got into Wharton, and everyone was like, you need to go to Wharton now. And I'm like, and then the job that I was interviewing for didn't pan out. So I was like, all right, I'll just go to the path of least resistance. I already, so moved to Philly in 2019. And that's when I got into the investing world. That's when I like really took a step back and was like, all right, I'm almost 30. I need to figure out what I really want to do. And crypto, it was something that stayed with me. Like I need to figure out a way into how I get into crypto professionally. Like how do I make it make sense and do it where you can do something really special and unique. And so while I was in Philly, I started working at a long short equity fund in New York. And I think it was the top of 2020 when my fund manager was like, hey, man, I want you to start, like I was covering fintech and consumer. And he's like, I want you to start looking at crypto, because I was the only guy that was dabbling in crypto at the time on the team.
Gotcha.
And so I was like, dude, like my hand was up. I was like, dude, I would do this all day.
Yeah.
I'm already doing this. Like, let me figure it out. And I remember talking to our prime brokers, and it was like, dude, you and every hedge fund is asking about crypto now. And then you suddenly saw like an influx of research from Goldman, Bank of America on like, all right, what's crypto? What is Coinbase doing? Are they going to IPO? And then all these things like suddenly started getting groundswell. And I was like, all right, maybe this is the time. And it was May of 2021. I graduate from Wharton. It's COVID. I'm virtual. I'm remote. And at this point, for the past year, I've been degenning in crypto, like I think almost all day. I was spending more time in crypto than I was in the traditional markets.
Love it.
And that's when I, made the decision that I'm going to go Web3. Like, this is the time. Like, again, kind of like going the wrong way. Like, I should go for this like simple, steady job. But no, I'm gonna like, kind of jump off the high end again and see where crypto leads me. And that's kind of how I am where I am today. There's probably like a small insect like there that we can expand on, but other than that, yeah.
Dude, that was, I would say that was one of the most thorough top answers we've gotten on this show.
That was Star Wars Episode 1, 2, and 3. Thank you. You delivered.
Not
and
only
if you wrote your Wharton essay that fast, I get why you got in.
And not only did you, it was coherent, it was cohesive, and you said a ton of amazing stuff there, dude. I appreciate that. Sorry, go ahead. You were going to say something?
No, it's like sometimes like going as a broken gasket. So I just want to, I'm glad you guys enjoyed that.
No, it's great, man.
That's what we're here for, man. A ton of stuff. You go, Manny.
I want to do a quick time check because you were saying before like maybe 90 minutes, and I just want to make sure we're okay.
Yeah, I can. I think we should be good for another 10, 20. I should be good. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I'll go quick. A couple real quick questions. First of all, can we just quick moment of silence for how amazing those original Halo LAN parties were on 1080p? If I still hear that music, I get goosebumps because I drank so much Mountain Dew during that time of my life. I can't. It's a magical moment. So thank you for helping me remember that.
I miss it, man. I miss it so much.
Oh man,
it's the best.
And it just, there was like, we had no responsibilities then. It was just play Halo all day. It was great. But no, I love that. I also think that it's interesting. So here's my big question, because this is actually way back to the very beginning. And you talked about your faith and your culture growing up. And my curiosity is this: which do you think weighed more into who you have become and the person you are now, or are they one and the same?
It's one and the same for me because I've kind of always, they've both been hand in hand. I just understand it more as a grown up because when I was growing up, faith was like my parents tell me to do X, Y, Z. Now that's
fantastic.
It's about like, yeah.
So was that, and then I'll just lead it into this and then I'll be done. And Mikey, you can go. I think one of the pivotal moments in your conversation, your story, was here you are, you're young. I know you had a ton of AP credits, so you were younger than probably most looking at all this stuff. And you were deciding what school you wanted to go to. And basically, you didn't want to go to NYU, and your parents were like, you need to go to NYU. Do you think it's like, again, part of that culture, how close your family was, building the trust and the belief in that is what allowed you to trust them making essentially like at that time of your life, a pretty massive decision for you, and knowing that they had your best interests at heart? Because I think a lot of people traditionally would like shy away from that, but I think it's really cool that you did that, and you found, in retrospect, loved it.
Yeah, no, for me, it's like I'm very, very close with my parents. It's also just a cultural thing. And so knowing my dad and the experiences he's gone through, like I know he's going to have the best for me. Hey, the guy's taking a loan out for me to go for this, right? Like
right.
I'm not paying for anything. Like the other thing that like I'm very, privileged that I don't know how much I spent going to NYU. I have no idea.
Right.
I had a credit card. And it, but he paid for the tuition, and I have no idea. Money was never something that I thought of going to
Got
school.
it.
That's huge.
My dad was like, don't worry about how we make this happen. And by no means was it like easy. I doubt it was easy for him now that I see how much he's done for us.
Yeah.
But it was this idea that you're going there to study, make sure you get good grades, take advantage of that ecosystem. And just hearing him talk, and and how he's carried himself, I still look to him for advice, even though,
That's
you know,
awesome.
he's not in crypto, but I'm like, should I do this? Like last year,
Right.
or actually, crap, time flies. No, maybe, yeah, it was last year. Sorry, I'm losing my, like, COVID's really screwed up memories on like what was last year or 2 years ago.
Right, exactly.
I had an offer to work at Stripe or join this DeFi startup. And it was like, well, all right, Stripe pays more, it's safe, it's a big company, you're not going to go anywhere. DeFi startup, there's 10 people, like literally the government could pass a law tomorrow and like half of DeFi dies. And he was like, do what you want to do, knowing that, like, dude, you've gone to 2 good schools, you're not an idiot. Like, even
Yeah.
if this company fails, you're going to be able to do it, but don't do stuff out of fear. And so it's like, you know,
Man.
he makes my life a lot
Yeah.
easier. And it's also kind of like, right, if I just really screw up, I can just move back home.
Right.
Still though, man, you had some fantastic mentors in your story.
Yeah.
Just true, genuine leaders, the kind of people who want the best for you, even if it means sending you on to do something even better. That is an amazing blessing, and I think that is really, really cool. It says a lot about the people you surround yourself with. I think that's really neat.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's like, dude, in high school, middle school, like my mom wouldn't let me go to the local mall alone, and then here she's dropping me off in the middle of New York City and saying, "All right, good luck." You know, it was like, it was just shocking to me, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah. No, that's super cool. And the only thing to layer onto that, because I know we don't have a ton of time left and I want to get to talk about National Lampoons
100%.
and the Web3, is just your comments on, there's 2 things that stick out in my mind the most. One, I think your journey got exponentially interesting for you because you went to New York. But on the flip side, one of the reasons why you were able to make sound decisions and have like a soundboard was your close-knit family. And those are kind of like 2 very different thought processes, and the fact that one is like staying close to home and comfortable and one is going out. I'd love to hear your thoughts on just the power of family, but then also making change. Like, what are your thoughts around that? Because you had both, and it seems like they both benefited you very well because they worked together opposed to separately. It's kind of what I'm getting. I'm interested in your thoughts around family and that just crazy change that you went through.
Yeah, I think like they supported me, and it was like, if my parents are willing to move from India to the United States, me going on a 2-hour flight is really not that big of a deal.
Ooh.
And that's how they phrased it. And it was also, you know, how do I become the best version of myself? And that's only through change and putting yourself in very uncomfortable situations. I think is probably the best way to say it, like getting out of your comfort zone.
Yeah,
because
sure.
I was forced to, you know, become more social. I was always a shy kid growing up. I was surrounded by so many people that when I was out in new places, I was very shy. I was very quiet. And New York helped me develop a personality that is now very social and loud and like outgoing and funny. It's like it gave me that confidence that like I don't need to be around my family. And I was also lucky. I made some really good friends my first year that stayed with me throughout. And so it was I think it's kind of like it was probably one of my biggest evolutions from a personality and so like personal growth perspective. So,
dude, it's crazy you say that, because same thing for me, man. Like moving across the country, leaving everything I know, it forced me to kind of figure myself out, who I was. And I always say my personal growth was exponential. And the professional was way far below it. And that's, I think, just more powerful in general anyways.
yeah.
Awesome.
So bring us forward into you're into Web3. You learned a lot about crypto. How do we get to what was the, you know, in like kind of like 2-minute short version? How did you get to the National Lampoon? How did that come into play?
Yeah, so it was early 2021, And I've been telling Raj, like, hey, crypto's going to be big. NFTs are starting to take off. There's something really interesting from a storytelling community perspective. There's something very cool on the protocol level. And I think it was when Beeple dropped, the entire media world and NFT world exploded. And a NFT marketplace approached Raj and National Lampoon to say, we would love to license your IP out and make collectibles, kind of like what Nickelodeon did.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, Raj and I started talking. I'm like, dude, that's very boring and very like, it's not like there's so much we can do if we don't license this out. Trust me on this. Let's start talking about this and start building out a strategy. So from basically March 2021 to December, we toy with the idea, but start thinking about if we were to do something in Web3, what would it look like?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I got involved. Me and Roger never worked professionally together until this. And I think it was at the beginning of this year where we finally had an idea that really clicked, that really made sense. Like, why Web3? Why NFTs? Why does the brand come here? And I think it was by June of this year where we felt like we were in a really good spot. And since then, we've obviously iterated on it. But that kind of is what brought us to this space. And the three big pillars were create NFTs and Web3, create a culture. It has the culture, but it also allows you to create a culture where the creators and the community are together. That was one big thing. Number two was the idea of this decentralized platform that's permissionless and censorship resistant. And the big reason there is that a lot of creativity in Hollywood dies because the studios aren't willing to make bets on up and coming talent, especially comedy in today's culture shift that's taken place. And so you don't get to see people that, now I do get that there needs to be moderation on the hate side, racism, all of that. There needs to be some moderation. But a lot of creativity dies because they just want to go for the blueprint winner, like the superhero blueprint these days. You don't get to see something unique.
Right.
So we saw Web3 as a way of, we don't need to go after massive talent. Why don't we, find these young up and coming writers, creators, comedians, work with them and let the community decide what they like and don't like.
Yeah.
And then let that be an outlet for this content in a world where we don't need to go to a Netflix or Fox where they're like, delete this or delete that. So that's kind of how this all came to be.
I love it. And so when you guys decided, I'd love to hear the story of real quick, Raj getting the National Lampoons. Like, what drove him to buy the National Lampoons franchise? I mean, I feel like not a lot of people would be like, this is an opportunity. So I'm interested in that story. And then maybe we'll give the kind of 3 to 4 minute pitch of what we can expect from your project. And then we can start winding down. How does that sound?
Yeah, sounds great. So for Raj, he started producing films in 2010 through that fund he had mentioned, right?
Yeah.
And I think one thing that they noticed as they did it was that they didn't want to go for volume as much as like, how do they build something in-house? And that's where he was talking about the Blumhouse. And we all had an affinity towards comedy. A lot of Bollywood movies are very comedic in fashion. We grew up with, one of my growing up favorites is like Home Alone, Rush Hour, and some of these classics that like even Rush Hour probably wouldn't get made today.
Right.
So, they'd be like, oh, this is way too offensive or blah, blah, blah. And so when National Lampoon came across for them, they were like, hey, this is a massive IP that is like, they're only seeing it because it was mismanaged in the 2000s. Yeah. So like otherwise it probably would be sitting at a major studio today. Like you're not going to get your hands on it. So we're presented with this unique opportunity, and then we can do what Blumhouse did for horror for comedy. How do we create this umbrella under National Lampoon that allows you to, incubate and launch young talent, but also be able to put out, things under this umbrella where, 80% of America and Canada still have awareness. Like you said, we did a survey, I think at the time in 2017 where, 80% still knew National Lampoon. It's a massive brand. So how do
Yeah.
we? It's kind of like, taking an asset and fixing it. Like how do we relaunch this brand for the modern generation?
You know
Yeah.
why?
think that's
Because
what inspired
80%
me.
of the households watch National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation because it's amazing.
Yeah, it's like that's the movie everyone knows. It's always on TV, right? Like that movie
Yeah.
everyone's heard of. And then Animal House, which is in the National Library of Congress. It's like these are iconic films that when you watch them and you enjoy them, are like a lot of it's true. Like, as an Indian, comedy is what brings you together with other cultures. You make fun of
Yeah.
each other. It's not in an insulting fashion. Like my closest friend is Greek. And so
Yeah.
there's all like comedy is what creates the jump from an acquaintance to a friend, and then to what
Absolutely.
so anyways, that's
Yeah.
that's how we saw it,
No,
or they
I
saw it.
love
I
that.
didn't buy it, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting you say that because even across cultures, you even see it. I mean, just Mike and I growing up. I mean, dude, the number of redheaded stepchild jokes that Mike got just for being a ginger. Do you know what I'm saying? And I mean, we all have our things, and it's like that's what you do. You're friends, you jive with each other, and it's humor. It's not meant to bite, you know what I mean? But it's just like you said, it's what you do. It makes us laugh. It makes us, it keeps us grounded. So I think that's a good thing. So tell us about, okay, so then now we know how National Lampoon comes to be, and how you guys are ramping up to say, okay, we can do something different. You talked about the pillars. I love those pillars, by the way, especially the permissionless and censorship resistant, because I think that's a massive part. There's so many powerful gatekeepers in film or in entertainment, in a lot of things, sports, right? There's so many powerful gatekeepers that people don't realize how much real talent gets either stifled, muted, or just completely, eradicated, honestly, in the space because they can't get through that and get out into the public eye. So what is the pitch? What is the what are you guys putting together? Where is it going? What is like that elevator pitch of what you guys are trying to do with National Lampoon and Web3 moving forward?
Yeah, I think the quick pitch is, we want to build a Web3 studio. How do we leverage this technology to bring creators, audiences, IP, all under one umbrella in a destination where everyone can participate and enjoy? I think that's our vision and our dream. And this comes in a few phases. One thing that we're going to actually we haven't formally announced it, but we are next week, hopefully, if the timing works, we are bringing back one of the magazine covers. The
Alpha alert.
Yeah, I think it's I'm blanking on the year. I think it's the 1973 issue with Van Gogh holding a banana. And what we are doing is we're working with our technology partner, Aspen, and how do we, and this is kind of going towards a debate of royalties and creator protections that's been going on in this space. Yeah. We want to be one of the first, if not the first, depending upon how this all plays out, and need to fact check a bunch of stuff. But we're bringing this cover, and we're going to give creators sub-licensing rights in the smart contract to reimagine that cover for how they would view it, and then also bake in royalties so that we can showcase how you can use original IP that already exists with a new spin with the artist. That's one thing that we want to showcase. Number two is the poison pill. That's our first, call it access pass, media 3 pass for the NFT. There's going to be 4,669 of those. And for that's what we want. That's, call it like our spark to build this community. Right. How do we get creators and audiences together with this pass, and how we envision what I think media is going to be in the future? How do we improve these experiences? And the easiest way that I've explained it so far to other people is that if you think about buying a DVD back in the day, you had the standard DVD, you had the Blu-ray DVD, and then you had the DVD with all the extras with like the shiny covers. Yeah. And so it's like in a digital world, you don't see that as much. How do we create content where you're a part of the life cycle of it? how can, if I was to make Harry Potter today and I sold you the Harry Potter wand NFT, and this is, that's just for Harry Potter, but the idea is, would you be interested in something where you could see the pre-production art of Harry Potter, be able to participate in early trailers that no one ever gets to see, and just be a part of that family? And then longer term with projects, be able to vote on where the story arc goes. So with the Poison Pill, what we hope to create is not only a marketplace of individuals coming together to create this unique content, but also build content that allows the community to have a voice on what characters there are, where that story goes, how does that get built, and then see it in a way that other people won't, like enhancing experiences.
Right.
And then the long-term vision is to set up a Web3 platform where the community can incubate and launch talent. How do we make this into a launch pad? People have token launch pads and NFT launch pads. We want to build the creator launch pad.
Right.
How do we leverage our brand in the community where we let the community tell us who they like and they don't like, and how do we create a pathway for them to build?
So to kind of follow this up, it was kind of last question, then Maddie can ask any last questions. Last question, we'll close it down. We obviously talk to a ton of projects, right? And there's a ton of projects out there trying this, use the community, create your own story, share with the creators. There's even directors out there that are doing what you're trying to do, right? So the question is, why do you think you all will be successful compared to the 100 other projects that are trying to do similar, not the exact same, but similar type things?
Yeah, I think for us, I think a three-pronged answer. One, I think we have a great team around us. We have individuals that have, been in the production studio writing space. We've brought in an advisory board with a very strong Web3 talent to make sure that we fill all the holes. So I think from a team perspective, I'm excited about who we've brought together. I think number two, we're leading with a recognized brand. We're not trying to build IP from scratch. That was one thing why we decided to brand the company National Lampoon and not something different. How do we get the nostalgia and the excitement that, hey, this is a brand that's very relevant in Hollywood and still relevant with a lot of audiences, and to remind people of the ethos of what National Lampoon was, very irreverent, edgy, and bring that energy back. And I think the third part is being really smart about how we think about things. We're not using these NFTs to crowdsource content. There are people that are like, stoner cats. You mint the NFT, you can watch this show.
Right.
None of these are going to be successful with 4,000 or 10,000 viewers. That's not how media and content work.
Nope.
For us, it's about, let's make the Poison Pill cheap and affordable. It's a smaller group. I think of it as if you think about the early adoption curve, these are the early adopters that want to be a part of something new.
Yep.
And the rest is for us. You have that pill, you're going to get a lifetime access to anything we do in Web3, regardless of where the financing comes from.
Yep.
Our goal is that let's build so much content up front where you don't need to wait and see, and let's not go with speculation, which is why we're not doing a PFP. It's a media pass. You have this. We have 50 years of content that's still hasn't seen the light of day that we want to leverage. We have Web3 native content, and we have our traditional IP where we're relaunching the vacation franchise. How do we give our Poison Pill holders unique experiences? Like, hey, that film's going to get made by a major studio, but we are able to offer you, hey, do you want to come visit the set or the red carpet event? Maybe 5 people or 3 people, whatever it is, come do that. The magazine we're going to bring back, which we, again, haven't formally announced, but we've talked about it, but a digital version of the magazine every month that people will always get as a Poison Pill holder.
Right.
So for us, it's about, hey, you may spend a few $100 on the Poison Pill, but we're hoping to give you enough content where you A, stick around, and B, it's like, oh, this was worth it. And lead with that.
Yeah.
And really build a product that's sustainable where, say we have a hit series, it lives with the Web3 community first, but let it go to Netflix and then use that financing to launch more projects.
Right.
Instead of trying to launch a lot of NFTs. Hey, NFT for X, NFT for Y, NFT for Z.
Right.
So,
and
that's the vision today. And a lot of this is, first time experimentation. So I bet we'll pivot and adapt and change, but that's how I see it.
I love it, man. I love that
Right.
explanation, and I think it was a thorough explanation. I think it's the right answer. And knowing now, hearing your and Raj's story, you got a good set of heads behind it, and the fact that you're not going to just, and honestly, I would say that's the number one flaw of all of these other people that have quote unquote IPs or were a director in the space. They just make them PFP and it's a cash grab. And the way that you're describing this, you get genuinely, you guys are trying to create something new for the long run, and that's really the difference in my mind.
Yeah, I think it's also how Raj has been very protective, when they got the IP, not licensing it out to different films or T-shirts, or let's hold off, let's figure out what we want to do and be very careful on the brand.
Yeah,
because we don't want to dilute it. There was a phase during the 2000s where there's a lot of VODs, video on demand, like just how do we make sure that we bring back the level of standard that National Lampoon operated in during the 70s and 80s.
Yep. I love it. That's awesome. So,
and then making sure that the Web3 makes sense at the end of the day. So
absolutely. I want to be cognizant of your time. We're almost literally at 2 hours. I told you it goes by quick. And I feel like we have way more to talk about. So I'm already ready to invite you back on when Raj has more time and we can talk more project but this was, I mean, we have multiple comments in chat that this is one of their favorite conversations and super informative. One of our guys literally streamed it to his car and made his daughter listen to us. Like that's how impactful it was to him. So like I said in the beginning, it's cool. We make impacts in very, very unique ways on this show, and something you said or Raj said touched somebody in a different way, which is really, really cool.
No, and that's I think the most exciting part about crypto and just what we want to do is empower. I got interested in crypto because the first reason was the parents are in India, not parents, extended families in India. Sending money to India is very expensive, and it takes 3 or 4 days. And it's like, how in this age, why does it take a week for money to reach someone, and you're sending $15 and you get charged $10 in fees? Now crypto changes that.
I love it. So Maddie, go ahead before I wind her down.
Well, and this is kind of, I guess, here's the thing. I mean, one of the things that drew me to Web3, blockchain, crypto is that decentralized and, more importantly, like you said, permissionless concept is huge for creatives, right? There are certain areas that are protected, but man, there's so many, and I think comedy is a great one, right? We are at a day and age, and I'm not going to weigh my personal thoughts on it, but what I'll say is this: we're at a point where you can only be funny if you're willing to say something that the committee of they says is funny, and that's not funny, right? And so the concept of humor, what National Lampoon grew on, like you said, that irreverent thought process, right? You can't do that anymore as a creative, because somebody somewhere, if 0.0001 somebody has a problem with it, then studios will shut it down. And the problem is you can't do anything that makes everybody happy and it be funny, right? And we see this with the, I mean, if it happens to Dave Chappelle, who's debatably, but for now, let's just say basically the greatest comedian, he's at the top of the hill, at least for now. It can happen to anybody. And that's the thing, is that, these people come from relative obscurity, right? Especially in comedy. These people are working really hard and they're going to these little side shows doing comedy. And all of a sudden, they come out of nowhere, but they've been hustling for a long time. And having an environment like this where they can, essentially be free to create, and then having the Web3 aspect of, because it's not just them, it's not just creators, it's the audience, the IPs together, but the audience feedback, so they can steer it in a direction that gets a good that resonates, is very, very powerful. And I think that it has to be done without the handcuffs of the committee of they, so to speak. So I think it's going to be interesting. I'm excited to see where it goes.
And it's cool that you guys have a well-known established brand to try to do that. It's going to be really cool.
We're pumped.
All right, so to wind it down, 2 last questions that are actually scripted that we didn't tell you about, and feel free to keep it short. But the first one is, do you have any questions for us? Because we just peppered you with 2 hours and 50 minutes of questions.
Not at the moment, but I know that many will come. We've talked, Mike, and I've already asked you a ton. So
Yeah, no, totally fine. Well, that's usually an answer, usually the response that we get. But I just want to always throw that courtesy out there. And then finally, you've probably listened into hundreds of AMAs, been part of AMAs yourself. How do you think this was compared to what you typically experience in the NFT space?
This was different, man. This was a lot, very personal, very different. Usually it's just, question after, question, answer. This felt like it felt personal. It's like we built a relationship while we talked about this.
Yes.
So it was exciting. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm glad you felt that way. And, you actually put kind of some of my similar closing comments in my mouth, but we literally look at this as the birth of a friendship. It just so happened to be through a 2-hour conversation online. And we can't wait to continue to talk and build our friendship together as we both try to conquer this crazy ass space. So with that being said, I'll let Maddie say his goodbyes, recaps. I'll say mine, and we'll call it a night.
Awesome.
Yeah. So thank you so much for taking the time and really to go off of what Mike said. We ask every single person, please give us Star Wars Episode 1, 2, and 3, and we rarely get it. And you put together in a very good, in a wonderful, succinct way, a story that took us through your journey. And I just think that's so important for people to hear. There's ups, there's downs, there's pivots, there's mentors, there's challenges, there's struggles, there's confusion, there's clarity. And I think that that's part of what lands us in a place. And what's really cool is your background, I do really think, has uniquely equipped you to be right where you are today. And I think it's really amazing how life tends to do that for us. And I think what you and Raj are doing is going to be something really special. I think it's awesome that you're doing it as family. I love how tight knit your family is, and you guys are equipped. And so I'm really excited to see where this project goes, and can't wait to be a part of it in the future.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
And hold on real quick. I'm going to layer on my final thoughts. Mimicked everything Matt said. We've had a chance to talk a couple times. I am thoroughly impressed about your mindset, your history, your background. You have an amazing support network. That's how I've gotten through most of my adversity. So I can be confident that you in the future will have people to give you good advice as a sounding board. And more people need to hear this. Like, this is why we have the conversation and these try to create a genuine connection. It's people like you and Raj that are going to make the NFT space successful. It's not pump and dumps. It's not putting a bunch of money in your crypto account and your MetaMask. Yes, all of those are good things. But people like you intelligently thinking about how to use massive IPs like National Lampoons and impacting the space in the right way over the long term is the key to all of us benefiting. So thank you in advance for all your hard work. And like I said, man, I can't wait to continue to grow the relationship. Would love to have you back on the show before you mint so we can talk more project and kind of the updates and how the project has evolved.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Maddie. Thank you, Mike.
Absolutely.
Yep, thanks a lot, man.
And with that being said, people, Midlife Crisis is out. We might have a chill stream on Thursday. One of the guests might be backing out. Just not sure. But we have a huge month. We got Morgan Stone, Rude Troop, Operation Sin from Llamaverse, Pawns and the Plague, The Wilders, and Dex from Phantom Networks. So get excited. We got a lot of projects coming. We love you all, and Midlife Crisis is out.